Black Etc. podcast, a podcast about how ideas and culture spread among Black Americans, especially outside mass media. I'm your host, Ian Youssef. For this episode, I speak to Jason A. England, who's a writer, a cultural critic, and English professor. You may have seen his work in places like the Chronicle of Higher Education, Defector, and the New York Times. I spoke to Jason about a mantra and ethos that I think has done untold damage to Black culture, and that is, can't knock the hustle. The idea that anything a person does for money, we have to respect it. We decided to talk about it through the lens of hip-hop music, and I thought that was a great choice because so much of Can't Knock the Hustle is reflected in how hip-hop has changed over the years. So Jason and I discussed the origins of Can't Knock the Hustle in hip-hop music. Spoiler alert, it was always there from the beginning. We talked about when it reached its zenith, which we both agreed was the late 90s, early 2000s, Puffy, Bad Boy, Master P, and then later Jay-Z eras. We talked about the lack of critical pro-Black politics in modern hip-hop and how hip-hop has become the soundtrack to regressive political thought in this country. We also spoke more broadly about academia and the tendency of smart people to try to project their radical and critical politics onto mainstream figures who do not share those values. And we discussed the limits of representation in Black politics. I wanted to call out one irony in the discussion. When we were talking about Puffy and Master P and how neither of us liked their music, Jason is a little bit harder on Master P than I am. I don't like his music, but I do think there's value in a lot of the production. And I do understand, as somebody with roots in the South, why it moves people and why people ride for it. Jason, on the other hand, in many ways, the New York rap fan came out of him. But in any case, in talking about Puffy and Master P, I effectively did Can't Knock the Hustle with them. I said, they made music that people liked at parties, so I gotta give them some credit. I'm doing Can't Knock the Hustle in a podcast that's critiquing Can't Knock the Hustle. That's how strong and powerful that concept is. Please enjoy. Today we're talking about the Can't Knock the Hustle ethos in Black America. Because that's such a large topic, I want to talk about it through the lens of hip-hop. And to help me discuss it, I'm here with writer and critic, writes for Defector, Chronicle of Higher Education, Jason England. Thanks for joining me.
Hey, thank you for having me on, and it's a pleasure to be here. And, I write occasionally for Defector. I've written in the Chronicle. I've written in Vox. I have a major piece coming out in the New York Times Magazine, and have also been a college professor for about 12 years. Recently took a step back from that. So I'm kind of all over the place.
I want to put my cards on the table. I think that Can't Knock the Hustle is the absolute worst thing to happen to Black culture in my lifetime. I think it's degraded art. I think it's created an environment where sellout values thrive. I just think it's the worst. But I wanted to ask you, in terms of hip-hop, where do you pinpoint the origins of the Can't Knock the Hustle ethos?
I don't think it's ever been absent once it became a commodity, right? As opposed to a live organic culture, which is no different from saying like, hey, if you and your homies threw a party every week, it's a party.
Right.
If you started charging at the door and there were flyers for it and everyone came from all over to it, it's a commodity you're selling, right? And it's not a cultural thing anymore. It's fundamentally changed. So it's hard to pinpoint the moment when it began, but I think that it reached a sort of peak of acceptability into becoming just doctrine around the Bad Boy Jay-Z era.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that's one era. I'm saying Bad Boy / Jay-Z, obviously two separate entities. And then it goes to a new level, in my opinion, when Master P enters the picture. And from there on, it was over. And I love hip-hop. I was just talking with a good friend of mine named Shaka about this. Hip-hop is my childhood sweetheart, right? I like to keep in touch with it. It doesn't mean I don't go other places for love and sex, right? a lot of times I don't even need hip hop anymore. But it's a thing, like with the people we love from our childhood who are part of our lives, inextricably entwined with our growth. It's a thing I like to reach back out to. I like to be able to reach back out to. So I keep in touch with it. And it's harder and harder to feel that there's any reciprocal love there for somebody who came up on it. That said, I think people are too sensitive about hip hop. And I don't understand what the problem is with letting it go. Mm. Like every art form has reached a point where it no longer is pertinent. The big condemnation I have of American culture is nothing has replaced hip hop yet. Mm-hmm. Hip hop should have been replaced a long time ago. I think this shit's dead for all creative purposes and in terms of impact. And I'm okay with that. I'm not even criticizing it. It should. It ran its course like all forms do. Where's the new shit to replace this?
Yeah. See, for me, I have a controversial theory or argument, I guess.
Okay.
I don't think that what's going on now, especially stylistically, I don't think it's hip hop. I think it's something else. They're just still calling it hip hop. So sure. All of the major things that you tied to hip hop, right? Rocking a party, that's fine, party music. Being able to perform live, that is done with the new regime. Forget about the sonic stuff, but like the idea that lyrics matter, that vocal style and technique, high levels of skill matter, all that's dead, you know? And those are some of the core things about hip hop. And so like, to me, the melodic stuff, it's cool, but it's not hip hop. It's something else. In the same way that they were still calling, you know, the music of our ancestors rock when it's not really rock and roll. It has no tie to rock and roll. It's just, they just keep calling it that, you know?
You're talking about culture and community. That's at the heart of any form of music, I think, if it's what it is. Yeah. And it's no different from gentrification. It's like ask a person who grew up in New York, and if they leave and go back now, if New York is New York the way they mean New York, right?
Yeah.
It's a totally different thing. I totally agree with you. And also, should add too, long ago, the people who were tied most closely to hip hop and who grew with it lost absolute control and access to the discourse.
Yeah.
And that changes it in a way that you can't get back as well.
And yet, I mean, I do understand why you have a hard time letting it go, right? Like, it's something that we're proud of. It's one of the best things at its peak that we've created in this country. You know, it would be like somebody saying, why won't you just let jazz go? It's like, well, wait a minute. That's our music. Or blues, you know? Yeah.
Yeah, I heard somebody say Playboy Cardi was the Miles Davis of this era, man. And I was like, bro, I've listened to that. You know, like, you can't be serious. But we don't have to let it go. Yeah. Like, there's no letting go timeless classics that we've consumed, right? Like, obviously, jazz still exists, right? And there's some modern jazz that's cool. If we're talking about when jazz was jazz, I haven't let that go. And in fact, it came to me later in life, you know? And it's amazing. And you're talking about something like beyond the point of pride. It's miraculous. This very small diasporic population of Black people in America created jazz and hip hop.
Yeah.
That is insane because...
And the blues. And whatever. And rock and roll.
And it's not just stuff that permeated into the American mainstream and influenced this country. It's global, man.
Yeah.
It comes back to us all these years later. I heard my goofy ex-girlfriend got married to a Senegalese pop locker. I saw a video. I'm not even making that up. I saw a video of homie. He was pop locking poorly. But I'm like, yo, decades later.
Yeah.
Our culture's coming back to us from these foreign fucking countries. And I find that to be outstanding. You could write several books on the miracle of that, but also beyond it being like a phenomenon, right? Just let's explain it, unpack it. I want to know because it doesn't make sense. But there is something about the experience that slaves and the children and descendants of slaves, and then the people who come here as immigrants after who are Black. There's something about our reaction to American culture that produces art that reaches everywhere and touches everyone. Mm-hmm. And I find that fascinating, man. That's so dope.
So to go back to the Can't Knock the Hustle origins, I think we're in alignment. I also pinpointed with Jay-Z, Puffy, and Master P for different kind of reasons. So Puffy and Master P, they are notoriously bad rappers. again, they produce music that moves people, so I can't knock that, but they can't rap. They're bad as performers. They're bad as artists.
The music's trash too. It's trash.
Well, yeah, okay. It's not my cup of tea, but they did make stuff that moved people at parties and all that, right? So, like, I gotta give them some credit, even though I really dislike both of them, but Puffy especially. But the whole thing about them was they basically cultivated the idea that it doesn't matter if I can rap. Making money and being popular is really the thing. Being a businessman, right? Which is what Jay-Z later took and ran with. And Jay-Z, I really credit or blame for basically killing the everyman in rap.
That's fair.
So everything is about, you got to have money. If you don't have money, you don't matter. And what's the difference between a 4.0 whatever, right?
That's pretty crazy.
Yeah.
30, 40 G's, beat it, cocksucker, right?
Right,
that was
right.
But I can remember it because it's an incredible song.
Yeah, yeah.
Jay-Z made dope music until he did for me. But what made him different was he was making dope music. So it was actually more like something to aspire to.
Yeah.
Because you kind of wanted to be like him. I didn't, but I mean, I had many friends and family members who did.
Right.
And at least I understand it. He was like, I'm a mogul. I'm a drug dealer, a former drug dealer. I approach this like hustling. I'm not a rapper. I'm a hustler who happens to know how to rap.
Right.
And that is an ethos that only he can really embody.
Right.
It empowered a lot of people who did not necessarily have that ability to rap, but who saw the appeal, which is that the whole game was like that. The drug dealers used to finance rappers and watch their money. Then it was like, yo, we're allowed to do this, right?
Yeah.
And there's this whole era of drug dealers that a lot of people haven't even heard of, that the music didn't, make it out of Brooklyn or off YouTube to becoming popular. But there was this era of drug dealers who were making music now and watering down the culture. But with Puff and Master P, why I say the music is trash is that just because people dance to it doesn't mean the music's good. And like, I'm not saying that pop music is trash. It's mad pop music that I think is incredible.
Yeah.
I think it's great if you can get people to dance. I think producing something that is almost like a commercial jingle, but is like, has a little more depth and melody to it, and that can get people on the floor. That shit is actually an art as well. But with Puff, it felt like, and P takes it to a different level, it's guerrilla marketing. It's almost like a bullying of the marketplace. And it's like musical propaganda. You've heard it so much that your response is to dance because it's in the club, right?
Right.
Puff is, for me, it's the degradation of the art, and that obviously he's not making the music and his producers are trying to make hits. And he's clearly someone who was listening to like the Ron G tapes back in the day, hearing those R&B blends that Ron G made, and then taking the most popular song, right? Sampling is a brilliant art. It's such a black art. It's like fucking, we have no money and we need Thanksgiving. We're going in the trash and in the cabinets, and we're going to turn a banana peel into a feast. That's sampling at its best. Puffy sampling is like, yo, this Diana Ross song that sold 20 million records, what if we just reuse the main part of it?
Right.
Yo. And then Master P takes it another level. It's like, a lot of those beats are just atrocious. It's just, it's like, no, the rapping's bad, the beats are atrocious, chorus is terrible. Yeah. It's almost like cartoonishly bad. Na 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 na, and like, like.
Yeah, I mean,
bro, you said he can't dance.
Yeah,
he can't rap. He's got a wild hairstyle that looks like a dread wig or maybe a mop. Like, he was very perplexing.
So, a few years ago, entertainment media made a big thing about hip-hop at 50. There were all these glowing pieces. It was like, oh, it's a triumph. And people were celebrating all the great things that happened in hip-hop and what a great place we're in. And you threw some cold water on those efforts in a Defector piece you wrote, which was called 50 Years Later, Is There Anything Left of Hip Hop? What was that piece about, and why was your take that was skeptical so rare?
Yeah, good question. You said the worst thing that you thought happened to black people was this sort of can't not the hustle mentality.
Yeah.
Generally, and then specifically, we're looking at it through the lens of hip hop.
Yep.
I think that the triumph of black Nixonian capitalism is definitely something that fucked us up. And there are other reasons, there are factors in that. But for me, the worst thing that happened, not just to black people, but to this society. I said this early on. Remember my homie Bo was like, he heard me say it. He came back to me a year later. He said, remember when you said that thing? I was like, yo, he's being a little extreme. And he's like, a year later, brother, you hit it on the fucking head. I agree with you completely. And that's social media.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I think social media, and this is an extreme statement, I'm not sure I would stand behind it 100%, but in some ways it produced and it engendered in people a psychosis.
Mm-hmm.
And it brought some of the most latent, terrible things in humans out to the surface. And so when you ask, that long-winded prelude is because I think one of the reasons I wrote it, one of the reasons it was rare, and one of the reasons it was received the way it was, both on the positive and negative side, is because social media has warped people and warped discourse into this state of either boosterism or base argument, where it's just clapbacks, right?
Yeah.
And so if you have something and a conflation, these catch-alls that came with identity politics, and I don't like it when people use woke and identity politics and stuff like that on the right in the most derogatory way to dismiss all claims. But I do think that there is something to this idea that we want it to be visible, and we bought into the basis level of identity politics. And we want to conflate hip hop culture with Black culture. And while those two overlap heavily, they're also very different, right? They're regionally different. My aunts and uncles did not listen to rap, for instance, and they're certainly Black as hell. And so I think people came to associate rap with Blackness in a capitalistic way, especially, and it becomes a form of Black excellence. And as such, it's on a pedestal where it's like an idol and you cannot attack it. So people are happy that they're writing about it, they're profiling it. 50 years of hip hop becomes like a Juneteenth kind of holiday, and everyone wants to celebrate. And also everyone wants to produce content about it. Yeah. And it doesn't matter to them that they don't understand what it is. They assume because they're Black, they have a fundamental understanding of it, and they can write about it. And so what you get are these listicles, 50 albums from 1993 that changed your world and all this shit. And you get a lot of measurements of the success of hip hop that are American white capitalistic measurements that are pretty irrelevant to the culture of hip hop. And so I wanted to look at hip hop through the lens of someone who genuinely loves it and viewing criticism as the height of love in many ways. If you love a thing, then you constantly critique it and think about it and are hands-on engaged with it. And I wanted to look at the reality of where it was. And what was that, 2023 at this point? You know, it was in such a strange place. Every day there was a new story where it was like EPMDs, for sure, dude, rap is out of control. Like, that's all I kept thinking every time I open a story. Or I see how a politician pimps it, or how it's a soundtrack to the most regressive groups of people and commercials and what have you. And politicians, I'm just like, what has happened and why are we talking about it so much without talking about it intelligently? And why is it that Black people are so drawn to participate in this?
Yeah. I went back and looked at all those pieces, the ones that you were critiquing, and the people they were celebrating. It was like Jay-Z's commercial success, Drake's commercial success, Lil Wayne, Kanye, Nicki Minaj. Half of them are like supporting Donald Trump, right?
Sure.
I've heard you say that we thought that rap was radical at one point, but it never really was. However, there is something odd about the fact that for most of my childhood, mainstream rappers, even if they had to just pay lip service to it, were pro-Black. They had some nod to Black politics. And now it's totally the opposite. You can count on one hand the number of rappers who you would say are political or pro-Black. And even then, their politics aren't necessarily that deep and bold. But there's something weird about the fact that there were tons of pro-Black rappers when I was a kid, and now there's basically none in the mainstream.
Yeah. I threw out a Public Enemy record the other day.
Yeah.
I went down a Public Enemy rabbit hole, and it sounded like dispatches from another planet, bro.
Yeah.
You can't imagine hearing some of this music.
Right.
I think it's tricky. So, like, I want to say, in no way do I mean that as an insult to hip-hop in its early phases. I think it always had a radical posture. But there were incredibly regressive elements to it, right? Like, I don't think you can ignore that just fundamental American misogyny, homophobia, and materialism were always right there on the surface, right? But absolutely, would there be a fucking X-Clan record today?
Right.
Would there be even the mix of like politics, culture, and house of the Jungle Brothers? Would there be Black medallions? You know, the Malcolm X hats? Like, I think hip-hop at its finest was like fumbling toward an idea of revolution and uplift.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it ever got there. And I think some of those characters, when you review them as individuals too, like years later, look at Africa Bambaataa, bro. You know what I mean? Like, I love it. Look, KRS-One will always have an argument for being the best rapper of all time.
Mm-hmm.
I don't even have categories like that. I just know he's always in the conversation. But I look at KRS-One, and there are times that I've seen him that he seemed like a bozo, right? There just are, right? He's done some things. He's had moments,
you
know? So like, you got to separate the art from the artist, right? But like, the artists were imperfect. The art wasn't always perfect. But it sounded like the artists understood their position versus empire and institution. They were like, this is who I am, and I am in opposition to this. Public Enemy shit is, who gives a fuck about a goddamn Grammy? It's like, compare that now to like the debate over how many Grammys Kendrick has versus Drake, or how many Grammys Kanye had, or how Jay-Z refused to show up because they weren't giving Grammys to rappers, but now it's cool. Or the obsession among people who are touted as Black intellectuals with the Oscars.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, are we in opposition to these institutions, or are we desperate for their validation? And I think that desperation for validation, I understand at this point, right? Like, and I do want to give this much grace to Black people, as much as I find them tragic and embarrassing and and I mean that in a loving way, tough love way, because those are my people. But I want to give them this grace. What do you do in a society that in moments of revolution ended up killing your revolutionary leaders in cold blood?
Mm-hmm.
And then, despite your aims to achieve equity through education, let you know that the only thing that would ever allow you to feel any sense of equity in the society was making some fucking money.
Mm-hmm.
After a while, you sort of abandon the ideas of integrity, culture, and education in favor of spectacle and visibility. And so, we come to that moment where revolution used to be like, the S1Ws and all of those dudes marching on stage and Essen and whatever else, or Tribe Called Quest with the Africana kind of stuff. You had this, in some ways, embarrassing callbacks to Egypt. You go from that to how revolutionary it is for Jay-Z and Beyonce to film a video at the Louvre, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's fucking crazy.
Yeah.
And I was on campuses throughout all this, right? So I'm actually seeing in higher education, people with Harvard degrees calling themselves trap house Ivy Leaguers and doing trap art. And it becomes like an outfit, kind of like when bougie people put on gold fronts. It's like, yo, what have we done where rebellion is just the lowest common denominator, visibility, mainstream visibility in capitalism? So I think at least we did have like this politics informed in some ways by the culture and the community. But the problem is hip hop music moves so far away from the community. The idea is appealing to the marketplace, and that's no longer us. So it doesn't feel like there's the spirit of Black people and Black life and populist politics of Black people in the music, because it's not made for us anymore. It's Black people making music for white people. They just happen to be Black. But we're so used to it being Black, and the faces are Black. And this is sort of where it melds with the politics of representation and how that sort of technology has fucked us up as well in the mainstream.
Oh, there's a lot there. Okay, so I want to go back to or drill down on the academic part, right? Because I've been reading academic works on hip hop since probably the early 90s. And it used to be, like you said, Public Enemy, NWA, all the native tongue stuff, Tribe, Latifah. Then it kind of moved to, later on it became like Jay-Z, Lil Wayne, Kanye. And then after that, Nicki Minaj, right? All of those people, everybody is talking about how radical they are, how liberatory their expressiveness is, and they're projecting radicalism and their own progressive ideas onto all of these artists, right? Why? What is that about? Why are academics so likely to project these critical and radical ideas onto these mainstream popular figures?
Yeah, that's tough. There are a lot of answers there. One is, and I think this is going to sound like too crude a dismissal, I don't think people understand how embarrassing the academy is. It's been embarrassing for a long time. And it's just gradually gotten worse. And it finally reached a point where it was full-blown terror. The ideas coming out of there, people want to be relevant. And a lot of them think talking about pop culture makes them cool, edgy, and relevant, for one. Two, there's a real class problem in the academy. And it's replicated in the non-white segment of the academy, too. But most people in the academy have or come from a good deal of money. My peers made the same amount of money as me, and somehow they had 2 cars and 2 dogs and kids and a nice home that they paid for. Right? It's like, that's impossible. Now, there are some dyed-in-the-wool, like, true blue academics, right? But that's not the majority of the people that you meet at these universities. So you have a superficial level of scholarship that's trying to appeal to this ethic that dominates even at major universities, which is we need butts and seats. That's how your department is measured in terms of viability, not how good your teaching is or who you produce and do the seat program. I can tell you from meetings I had at a major university where I work, one of the best universities in the country, a lot of times it was like, you're over-enrolled. That's great. What gets people in seats? There was a dude who was doing a Shakespeare class, and somehow, I can't remember why, but he had his poster, his advertisement in the hallway had a little Nas X on it. It's a white guy who I know that was black. But this appeals to young people. Right?
Yeah.
Again, I'm not going to totally blame social media, but social media began for a period to be an avenue toward a sort of a small-time celebrity. And a lot of public intellectuals and people in the academy, they want to be seen too.
Yeah.
Nobody wants to do research, especially when they think it matters, that they put all these hours into all of this research and theory and classes and their own original writing, and they have the same 18 people read and discuss it at a conference. Right. This was a chance for real access and viability and relevance. But it's almost like that saying that all money's not good money. Sometimes you don't want to be relevant in certain discussions that dumb down the understanding of the culture. But there's some of that for sure. The other thing is, it doesn't absolve scoundrels from being scoundrels, but it has to be recognized that people, and I don't know who to blame for this. I don't think it's simple enough to say oligarchs or conservatives or corporations, but whatever this country has inevitably devolved into, it has broken all the machinations politically that empowered people, everyday people. So if you don't have any machinery for change, and you have a spirit or a desire to change, you have to channel it somewhere. And what you end up doing, because it is capitalism, is you start to mistake your consumer choices for radical politics. And this is what social media hurt us, because it's a constant argument about not what anything means or whether it has real political worth, but how our choices of what we consume are political just necessarily. This happens with art, and this is why you see such discussion, like endless discussion of sinners in one battle after another, because we project all of these radical political positions that we want to see in society onto the art we consume now and the scholarship we consume. And it simply cannot sustain the weight of it. It's that we don't see the art and the scholarship for what it is. We see it for what we want it to be. And that plunges us into this state of a mix of impotence and nihilism that's really depressing to watch unfold. And people are very passionate because they have a lot of passion and anger stored up. And we've taught them to use it poorly. They're directing it to the wrong places, and it's just making people more money.
Yeah. This is kind of a related thing and a little bit off of topic, but it reminds me of the concept of Poptimism and criticism. What is your position on the critical turn towards Poptimism and mainstream criticism, particularly with respect to rap music?
Shocking, comical, depressing. You know what it's like? At some point, as you become older, and if you've been privileged to receive a good education and you've moved about a little bit, you curate your circle of friends. You have, and cool is maybe not the best term to use, but in my sense, I got this really cool, intelligent, comprehensively understanding group of friends. So sometimes when I'm not talking to them, like they put me in a bubble, whether I want to or not, of discourse. I step outside and suddenly I realize, oh shit, most people are morons. I had a dude in my gym, black dude named Lester. He's like 77. I love Lester, man. He's a real cool dude, man. But one time we had these 2 new members at my gym. They were Asian and they didn't know their way around the gym.
Mm-hmm.
And, they're lifting the weights wrong and doing re-racking wrong, whatever. And he goes, hey, New York. He calls me New York. Hey, New York. New York, look at those 2 over there. I call them Ching and Chong.
Oh.
I'm like, I know that you not say that out loud.
Mm.
And he says, I call them Ching and Chong because they're Asian. I'm like, brother, that was implied. You didn't need to explain the bit. It's a crude bit. But also, no one that I know would ever say that out loud. So stunning. But it's a reminder that people are like that, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, I think I missed out on some of the Poptimism, and it hit me because of my intellectual curiosity. I'm teaching these kids at a very good university, and they won't stop talking about Taylor Swift. Mm-hmm. My students in my English class would not stop talking about Taylor Swift. And unironically, just like she is the greatest songwriter of her generation and maybe the greatest songwriter and artist of all time. And what was shocking to me is that I understood her as a pop act. I wasn't familiar with the music. And I thought to myself, when I was in college at a really good school, the kids were trying their best to definitely not like something that was mainstream, that was frowned upon. Then I started noticing on my social media timeline that these major publications and sometimes edgy publications were writing these missives about Taylor Swift, right? So finally, this was like 4 months ago, 6 months ago, something like that. For the first time in my life, this all came back to me and I said, yo, dog, I'm going to investigate Taylor Swift's music because I don't have an opinion about her. And in order to have one, I need to earn it. I'm not even fucking with you. I'm still traumatized, dog. I dug into it. I watched interviews. I listened to songs and I said, holy shit, this is terrible. Relative to like musical genius, this is a talentless bum. And she's a billionaire. My college students were telling me how brilliant it was. And I'm listening to the songs and I'm like, oh, we're fucked. Right? Like, she's the greatest lyricist ever. We're not exactly talking about fucking Joni Mitchell here. This ain't Tori Amos. Like these lyrics they're not hitting like that. The music's not hitting like that. Then I'm watching her on stage and she can't fucking do a show. Right? And I'm hearing the interviews and she's yet another fucking boring narcissist. And I thought, okay, what happened that made legitimate writers write books and intellectual essays about this person? And I don't know that I have a very neat answer because it is so mind-numbing to try to figure it out. But it feels like an acquiescence to a totally defeated culture. Yeah. And understanding that the only thing that matters at this point is feeding the people slop. And this is where I think people misunderstand AI. People always talk about AI as this sort of like alien computer race that will wipe us out, where AI is clearly simply one of the worst distillations of our darkest desires. Yeah. AI comes from us. It's an extension of us. And we've been trying to have AI forever, whether it's the real doll, whether it's fantasy baseball, whether it's Jennifer Lopez's vocals, whether it's Taylor Swift as genius. We want things that are separate from history, that are separate from context, and that cut out the thing that makes us human, which is process. Like, what does it tell those devils? Hell no. Sell your own Jell-O. We want this Jell-O cube, right? We have given up and we've said, feed us the Jell-O cube. We desire a lack of process and thought. We want slop, and we want to talk about slop like it's brilliant, because that also is a very self-centered, narcissistic action there. It's like the thing that I'm critiquing doesn't have to matter. It's just that I get to write about it and produce content about it, right? And I think this is something that marks hip-hop discourse. When you talk about the 50 years of hip-hop and why I don't think many people wrote the sort of thing I did, I think it's because there became this thing where our culture, and again, I do think the curation of the self via social media contributed to this. It became so self-centered and narcissistic that the only thing that matters is what's happening to me and what happens now and the 18 people I talk to about it. And so everything is important because it's happening to me, which is why you get these people who are like, J. Cole's the greatest rapper of all time. Drake's the greatest rapper of all time. Billy Woods is the greatest rapper of all time. Even with the artsy stuff, you can't just decide that the artsy person of your moment is better than someone who existed 10 years ago and who had a much longer, more impactful career culturally. And these takes happen all the time because there is less of an emphasis on the importance of history and legacy.
Mm-hmm.
I happen to live through, and I believe it is true, one of the true golden ages of hip hop.
Yeah.
That's a matter of circumstance. I love Jodeci. I love Keith Sweat. I love all the R&B of my youth because it's my youth. There was never a single moment, not one, that I thought my aunts and uncles didn't listen to better fucking R&B than I did. Jodeci's better than Stevie Wonder? What the fuck are we talking about? I think there's a clear, if you are interested in the world outside of yourself, and if you believe in the world as community, which increasingly we don't because of social media, we don't find community at home. Our community is digital, right? If you believe in community and history and the importance of it, then you start to study it, you pay attention to it, and you feel connectivity. And that's what was lost in hip hop too. This is a music, a genre in conversation with itself. Suddenly, one day you wake up and that's not the case anymore, right? It doesn't pay to know the history of Black music and Black people and different cultural things that only Black people would know. The music doesn't incorporate that or speak to that anymore, right? There's a flattening of identity. So, yeah.
And not only that, it's that the people themselves and people who are fancy themselves academics or critics or people who should know better are out here trying to tell you that the lack of history and the ignorance and the indifference to history is somehow a positive and is somehow like a radical progressive thing, that they're forging their new way and not stuck in the past.
Yeah.
Okay, so take it back to Can't Knock the Hustle. How do you view the ethos outside of hip hop? So like in the community at large, what kind of signals were you getting outside of hip hop that this was something that was infiltrating the community and really becoming dominant?
Oh man, I don't know where to start with that. That's really difficult. I mean, I have a million answers. It's hard to express these things because there was a time that this kind of conversation, and I don't want to take it back to like 70s intellectual circles, but I will just for the purpose of the analogy. In the 70s, if you look at the Black intellectual scene, there's like 8 different factions.
Yeah.
At any given time, people will be arguing vehemently against each other. And yet at the end of the day, be united in certain fundamental common missions, right? There was a diversity of viewpoints. And I think when I started to see, and you see some of this in the response to the hip hop piece I wrote, you see that people don't know how to argue anymore or think.
Yeah.
That they have very black or white opinions and they become very tribal. And I started to see that because that tribalism also was very distinctly capitalistic, which was to say, we talked about representation a bit, right? And it's like, if I'm visible, if it is Black, it is therefore worthwhile. It has value. And I think there are a bunch of examples of this, from the trauma narrative and its popularity to the representational politics of like, most recently, like let's say a Jasmine Crockett or a Kamala Harris, or even a Barack Obama, who I will tell you, I voted for Barack twice. And the first time I really meant it. When he was elected, I cried. It wasn't intentional. I found myself moved to tears because I thought it meant something symbolically. I look back on it and I see it as actually one of the most significant moments in the shift from Black activism to Black representation, and what it did to us, maybe we'll never recover from. Symbolism and capitalism kind of took over activism, and I don't think we've gotten up under it. So the signs are everywhere, from the movies that are celebrated to the amount of significance we put on the flimsiest cultural products, to the conflation of individual capitalistic success with cultural and revolutionary success. I think everything we see in rap, we see in Black mainstream society. A lot of the institutions that we came up relying on, from places like the NAACP to even churches, have been overwhelmed by this capitalist Can't Knock the Hustle ethos as well.
Now we get to the portion of the interview where I ask my guests the same questions. First one, what songs got people on the dance floor when you were going out dancing at your peak?
I'm not answering that.
Well, I think I know what it is. Is it dancehall or is it Akinelli?
There were plenty of both, but that's not even why. Like I can give you a list, and it would range from, like More Money, More Problems, to Rob Basic Takes Two, The Nicest Folks, or whatever.
Yeah.
But whenever I think of songs that got people dancing, my mother has 14 brothers and sisters, and I have a whole lot of cousins, and our family is like a gang. And I think about family gatherings.
Yes, yeah.
To me, that was real Black culture, personally. So, like, I think of, like, Alicia Myers, I Want to Thank You. Fonda Ray, Over Like a Fat Rat.
Yeah.
I Found Lovin'. The D-Train, Keep On. Computer Love at the end of Block Parties, Forever. Let the Music Play by Shannon. Funky Sensation, Gwen McRae. Funkin' for Jamaica, Tom Brown. Billy Ocean's, I think it's called Nights Like This, or Nights Feel Like Getting Down. Rick James, Cold Blooded.
Yeah.
Evelyn Champagne King, Whether It's Love Come Down.
Yeah.
And The Beat Goes On by the Whispers, When I Was Really Young, was my favorite song. And then Will Smith had to ruin it. Take Your Pick of any MJ, Stevie, or Gap Band. And Hot Music by Soho.
Oh, yeah.
But songs like those are the ones where it's like, whenever they come on, to me, those are the illest get people on the floor songs, where it feels spiritual, like people really bond communally over those. And I miss music like that.
What's a Black cultural work that's a classic but is underappreciated?
Our intellectual output has virtually no value in society, bro. So I think they're actually all underappreciated. That's the sad thing. Like, you ever, like, when you're around people who know these things, it's so jarring to step out of that realm and talk about, like, things that everyone knows in your mind. So I want to give you an example of this, but my answer is The Crisis of the Negro Intellectual by Harold Cruz. But there's so many books I can name, but I'll give you an example. I was teaching a class. At one point, I was teaching at the University of Iowa. Now, the breakdown of that is the student body at the time I was there, it's like mostly small town, sometimes rural Iowans and suburban Illinois kids, all right? So I'm teaching Ta-Nehisi Coates' Between the World and Me to them. And we get into class and it's silent. And I tell them, listen, I understand that you've never seen a Black person in a position of authority, many of you. And you're worried about talking about this material. I don't care. I don't give a fuck. I know what your mother said, your father said, your grandfather said, your uncle and your baseball coach about Black people. We're having a real conversation here. And this one white boy in a frat raised his hand and he said, actually, I really liked it. The one critique I would say is that I wish he didn't refer to so many obscure Black historical figures. I said to him, I think you would be making his point, which is that you view these people as obscure for systemic reasons, but they're not obscure. But who are you talking about? And he said, he flipped through the joint and he said, well, this guy Tolstoy, he quoted. I collapsed to the floor because he didn't know who Tolstoy was and he thought he was Black. So I went to the bar later where all of the professors and writers and shit gathered at night. And I'm telling people this story. And what I realized is I haven't really read much Tolstoy. But why I know Tolstoy is because I used to watch Cheers. And there was an episode where Cliff Clavin was trying to read War and Peace, which is to say that our pop culture used to give us cultural cachet and cultural currency because the writers of it were also educated and they would work this material in. So what I realized is there was a failure of culture at the lowest and highest levels to educate where it used to educate so that students don't even know basic white culture that we used to take for granted. So they sure as hell don't know any Black books I mentioned in class. I promise you, they don't know a single movie or piece of literature that I mentioned before they made American fiction. And that kind of brought Percival Everett back or into the real spotlight for the first time. And then they gave him his Lifetime Achievement Prize for James. When I would teach Erasure, I promise you I was one of the only people in America teaching that in the classroom. No one knew what that was. Right. And no one knew what he was, right? So it is really hard to pinpoint, even though I gave you Harold Cruz, I feel like you could say anything, right? and it would work.
Yeah. And finally, what particular dish did your family make that you look forward to the most?
That's really, really rough. I got, there's so many to choose from. I'm going to give you a few, and I'll probably err on the side of desserts because I never get those anymore. But my family, my grandmother's from a really small town called Farmville in Virginia. It was one of those towns where RFK had to go personally. Like, nah, for real, you have to desegregate.
Yeah.
What? And my grandfather's from the Caribbean, he's from Antigua. And so you had this mix of classic Southern food and Caribbean food in the household. If it was a savory dish, I'm going to say two. One, I never ate. Like, I tasted it, I didn't eat it, but I miss it because it meant something to everyone else, which is pig's feet. I wasn't fucking with them. Or chitlins. I did taste pig's feet once, at least. I wasn't even touching no chitlins. My grandmother had a secret recipe for pig's feet where she cooked them in Valentine's ale. But the way my uncles loved those motherfuckers makes me miss them. My mom used to make this bacalao recipe from my grandfather that I miss incredibly, and I haven't had it done right. And I'm a good cook. My mother was a great cook. And there are certain recipes of hers I won't touch. But really, it's my mother's sweet potato pie and her peach cobbler. And she also made a mean rice pudding. And she would make two batches, one with raisins and one without, because she knew I didn't like warm raisins. She would make one for the family and then a smaller one just for me. I was almost tearing up thinking about that level of care for her to do that for me. But so those are the dishes I miss most.
Well, Jason England, thank you so much for joining me. I really enjoyed this discussion. Where can people find you?
Shit, you find me where you need to find me. Don't even look for me, man. But I think I'm on Twitter like at Jason A England 1 or something. I can't remember.
You're a hard man to find. I will say that.
Imagine wanting people to find you. That's the thing about this era of social media too. We need to keep more of ourselves for ourselves. So don't even look for me.
Thanks so much.
Yo, it was a pleasure, man. For real.
I'd like to thank my guest, Jason A. England, for a vibrant discussion. This is normally the point where I list the guest's website and social media accounts. Jason doesn't really do that, so you'll have to be content looking for his pieces in the Chronicle of Higher Education, Defector, and the New York Times. The lesson from this episode, I think, is pretty clear. It's that representation and inclusion into mainstream institutions is not radical or critical resistance to them. If we insist on projecting our beliefs and desires onto mainstream representatives or tokens, you will only be disappointed. You're deluding yourself into thinking that that is in any way radical or subversive. But the other lesson is that despite how much we have, in Jason's words, given over to a culture of defeat and accepted that mediocrity and representation into the system and going along to get along counts as resistance, there is a widespread desire for resistance. People are not necessarily content with what's going on, with their choices, and the fact that they are seeking to channel and project resistance onto the most tepid representatives of the system speaks to that. So people do have a desire for change, but because all avenues have been systematically closed off, they're content with the lowest common denominator. As always, please like, rate, review, subscribe on whatever platform you use to listen. Please visit the website, blacketcpod.com. Until next time.